When we think about IPL, you all know IPL saw a world record of about 32 million concurrent users during IPL final and about 450 million total viewers during the entire event, which is phenomenal if you think about it. When we all, and especially me, when I think about IPL and all the associated cricket in India over the last 10 years, we think of Dhoni. But there's another person who we'll get to meet today, Ashu, who's the architect behind the camera and had more successful IPLs than Dhoni over the last 7 years. With that, Ashu, I would like to open it up and ask you, what does it really mean for cricket skill? What does it really mean to you?
Cricket skill means, see, one of the goals why I love cricket and why I would like working for IPL is, as a technology or as an engineer, you rarely get a chance to work on a product which can connect and touch a billion people, right? A billion or more people, or potential to touch more than a billion people. So for me, cricket is one of those, and IPL definitely gives you an opportunity to touch and reach out to hundreds of millions of users. And eventually, my goal is that someday you'll help me touch like when I say touch, I mean to say indirectly or directly, right? I'm touching about a billion people, and that brings in its own challenge and its own complexities, which is that I'm not a cricket fan at all. I don't watch cricket. So I like to run cricket, but I don't watch cricket.
That's fascinating. How would you compare, though, like when we talk about cricket scale to all the other kinds of applications that you sort of build in software, right? Like what's special? Like all this concurrency and the scale we talk about. Um,
So
how does it?
we have all studied about these concepts in software engineering, right? Concurrency, concurrent writes, and concurrent these things. Okay, when you talk about cricket, it actually throws you those kind of challenges in front of you. I think most of the other software applications do not give you that much amount of concurrency as much as event like IPL gives you. Because like if there are 10 million people watching on the game, there are always people coming and leaving. There are people always coming, right? There are always concurrent requests coming to your system, right? Literally concurrent requests, not the concurrent in terms of, okay, I got this much TPS. Like even at the same microseconds, you will probably have the same request hitting your systems and creating interesting complex interesting challenges for you, right? So how I look at IPL is that one is concurrency, right, which is the number of people who are concentrated in a short span of time and coming it over there. Second is time sensitivity, right? Any other software application is used over the course of time. There is a longer window of usage, but with cricket and IPL, I think you have to operate in that short duration or short windows of like 3 hours, 4 hours. It just makes it complicated, I believe, or challenging or interesting for you, right? That time is of super sensitivity. Like I don't know how many of you have done events in colleges, but before the event used to start, right? There is so much of anxiety, there is so much of pressure, there is so much of energy, right? Till that event starts and gets over. That is what I used to enjoy in my college, and that is what I get to feel with cricket every day.
Yeah, that that probably sums it up. And to add on to that, I guess the whole expectations of such a billion people to sort of see, not miss out that cricket shot on the last ball or have that lag changes, and to be able to deliver that the way you guys do is just
Yeah.
phenomenal. That leads me to something interesting. Uh, Looking at all the metrics in your monitoring systems, are you able to predict when Dhoni is coming to bat?
I don't think if that was possible, we people would have been making more money out of that. Like more than us keeping our systems afloat, people are making more money out of that. So you cannot predict that, right? And that is the one dimension which is super interesting, right? Like no matter what you do, you cannot predict how the event. Recently, I think one of the games, what happened is the game got ended. It was a I don't recall the series, but the game got over, and then there was one super over. Okay, you'll think, okay, one super over, cool, we have handled that. Let's do it. Then there is another super over. The only thing we like you cannot predict those things, right? We were almost everywhere at the office was just packed their bags and like, okay, we'll leave for work, we'll leave from office to go back and in 5 to 10 minutes. But the game is not getting over. It ran for another 35 to 40 minutes, and we were kind of stretched on our systems, and we were like, oh, why is this game not getting over? Why is this game not getting over? So yeah. So the point coming back, right? The unpredictableness of the nature of the game brings in a lot of interesting challenges in terms of monitoring and this in perspective, right? You have to always be vigilant throughout your system to ensure that something nothing is changing or nothing is behaving in an anomalous way, right? Which is super important. Like no matter there's no set alerts, right? You cannot put an alert saying that okay, this is the threshold I want to reach to. There's no staticness. This is all dynamic environment. So dynamic environments requires you to have systems, monitoring systems which can adopt to this dynamicity and be able to operate in that, right? So that is what Dhoni brings on monitoring and alerting. That hey, your static thresholds. I cannot set up an alert of saying that okay, if I hit a 25 million requests per minute, give me this thing, or if I hit this thing, do this thing, right? Like you have to be mindful about the dynamicity and the environment you are operating in. So that's what tools need to adopt to, in my mind. In fact, the preparation starts on the last day of the current event or the last previous event. Okay, the moment the last day is over, we're like, okay, we need to start retrospecting and figuring out what went wrong or what did we not do, and that is the time we start preparing for this thing, because a lot of the underlying stuff which comes together by the end of the beginning of the next event requires a lot of operational and capital related stuff also, right? Capex in terms of CDN capacity, in terms of infrastructure capacity, which cannot be done overnight, which cannot be like, no matter what we say, whether the cloud is infinite, whether the cloud is elastic, but cloud is also finite as a resource, right? So you need to think about it. The moment you end, you realize that where were you capped or where were you limited, and you start planning for that, right? So in some format, the planning starts from the day one event gets over, and it continues from there on. But it continues at a certain pace. There's always this in background. Everything we are building, we're always thinking about IPL scale. We're always thinking about a cricket scale event. Every feature we build, there is always a question that how would you scale? How would you do this? Right? How would you take care of if this fails or if this doesn't work? So there's that continuous baseline thing. As you get closer to the event, things start to amp up, right? Then you start to do a lot of things which you haven't like lot of things for preparing the systems, for ensuring that all the changes you have done in the system from the last time to this time has not degraded or reduced the quality of your quality of your services and all of those. You run a lot of audits, you do a lot of drills, you have new people who have joined in, so you have to also ensure that those people are groomed, so those people are brought up to speed who have not seen IPL. People are very important part of those things, right? And then there comes the operational readiness, right? Again, with existing people, new people, with new machinery, and IPL is just not an engineering thing, right? It's not about just getting a feed from the camera and streaming it on the screen. There's so much of surround stuff as well. Like the number of people involved, I don't know, but probably thousands of people are involved in getting your feed to your home, right? Like to your digital device, from a cameraman standing in the stadium to your people sitting in the studios, from director producer to your encoding systems to in networks to lines to everything, right? All of that has to work in synergy to ensure that it works, right? So it's like in my mind, it is like a clockwork, and it's a clockwork which is moving in a very fast speed and a very time sensitive this thing, so that so you it that's all it takes behind the scenes to make an IPL successful, right? And a lot of it is goes to there's a sharing between TV and digital, but when you're doing digital, there is further complexity which comes into the picture, which brings in interesting aspects. So that is all I will say, right? It is the preparation starts, just summarizing up, the preparation starts from the day that the last event is over. It is a continuous process, and as you come closer, you amp up on the all the dimensions, from people, operations, process to your planning and everything. I hope that covers. If you want to dive into one of these aspects, we can get into that as well.
Oh no, absolutely. This is all so fascinating that I think we could keep talking about it and
Yeah,
time wouldn't be sufficient. But to deep dive into some of these aspects, right? How do you
yeah,
think about, I remember discussing with you long ago around how you think about the four layers in terms of
yeah.
being able to track it, right? I think that's always fascinated me in terms of how that comes along for such a scale. Maybe could you sort of deep dive into that and then maybe we could cover some infra specific bits.
All is said, right? Like in the end, whatever we are building as an engineer is to drive a business metric, right? So and there has to be a mapping, or there has to be a way to be able to correspond and understand that how your systems are impacting your business metrics. So I always believe that you have to break down your systems into layers, right? You're collecting metrics. There is engineering metrics. On top of engineering metrics, there are product metrics. On top of product metrics, there are your business metrics, right? From a product point of view, this is from a pure product point of view, right? Like that. So you try to measure everything in the metric systems, and you're ensuring that things are there. And you roll up, right? So if you know that, let's say user acquisition. If we talk about user acquisition is a function of how your app startup times are, how an app startup time is function of how your APIs are behaving, which are in the path of starting up this thing, right? So all the response times and systems behind it, and then there is this thing, right? That is one dimension of how you look at metrics, right? Then the other dimension is if you just look at from an alternate point of view, right? There is your base infrastructure on which it is running. Then on top of that, there is your application stack, right? Like there is infrastructure, there is application stack, and like we always split this, right? Like there is core infrastructure, which is different tier. There is like how you have TCP layer diagrams, right? That's how I think about it, right? There's like core infrastructure. On top of there is your applications which are running. On top of our application, there's product, and then on top of that, there is this thing. Like that's how we look at metrics.
Yeah, that's always been interesting because typically what I've seen otherwise is people sort of worry a lot about infrastructure metrics, but because they tend to be very volatile and ephemeral in nature because of the nature of infra today, not being able to correlate that with either application or product becomes a bit of a problem because you're not actually able to drive or
Yeah,
correlate it to
you
a
see,
product metric.
yeah, you need to have the correlation so that you know what to prioritize. Even if you're not watching or correlating it in the real time, understanding that how that things are mapped to each other is super important. Because if I go to any metric system in AWS or GCP or anywhere, there are thousands of metrics, right? Even my application is emitting thousands of different metrics, and there are hundreds of applications. So I've got so many unique dimensions and series of metrics which are coming in. That what do I look? Like I cannot look at everything, right? I cannot expect and I cannot react to this. So it's important to figure it out how things are connected to each other, right? How it's important to figure out how your business, this core business metric is dependent on which of the key metrics on the product layer, and these product metrics are dependent on which of the key metrics on the application layer. And once you do those, right, and when you're operating in a real-time environment, you will try to find out leading indicators, things which can indicate faster. So I classify metrics into like leading indicator and trailing indicator. Leading indicators are basically things which can help you identify things which are about to happen, or things which, for example, CPU. If you see CPU spiking, your reaction is, oh, something is going to terribly go wrong. Okay. If you see RPS increasing, you say that, okay, this is going to terribly go wrong, right? Whereas there are metrics which are disk utilization, network utilization. They're not going to help you with anything, right? They're not going to help you figure it out. So you have to identify from the set of metrics you're looking at and say, okay, these are my leading indicators, and just ensure that those leading indicators are tracked properly, and you have a high vigilance on top of it.
Yeah. In terms of this, like specifically if we deep dive onto infra, because there's a bunch of questions that are coming through along those
Sure,
lines. So I'll take a
sure.
deep dive slightly. What does an infra preparation look like for such a scale? Like, what do you even do? Where do you start?
That's a very so it's infra preparation starts with a back of envelope calculation. Okay, it's I say this. There's no uh, like I literally do a back of envelope calculation, because see, ahead of time, I'm talking about 6 months ahead, 3 to 6 months ahead of what the event is gonna be, right? My services have to go to a phase of load testing. They have to go through a phase of performance tuning to actually determine the actual numbers, right? But I cannot wait for that to happen to determine what my infra size should be. So I always do a pessimistic calculations and do back of envelope calculations based on what my product looks like. Okay. And based on the product, I know what all features I'm powering, and I know what all to power those features. What is the amount of, maybe a rough approximate count of requests or count of things I would be calling, right? And when I know the approximate count of requests, I'll do a pessimistic approach and say that let's assume that everything operates in a synchronous manner. Okay. Every request is being processed in a single threaded environment. There's no multi-threaded environment. If I were to process this much request volume at this latency or RPS, what is the computation or the CPUs or the memory I would need to operate it, right? And from there, you would get to know how much your cache designs are, what your cache offloads are, and from there you can figure it out how much DB are you're gonna hit, right? How many requests from your systems are gonna hit the databases, and from there you can do a rough calculation, right? So that's how you do a very basic back of envelope calculation to begin with, right? And that gives you a approximate ballpark figure. It might be completely wrong also, but it gives you a number at a starting point, right? And then you go and fine tune from there. Then you say that, okay, let me understand, if have I optimized this application? Is this application super optimized to operate much faster? So if it can operate much faster, then I know, okay, I can reduce the amount of workload I would need over there. And then you come to an infra size, work with all the providers, plan it out, ensure that all of that is sorted out. If it is not sorted out, call out those risks, understand what can you do to mitigate those risks. And see, it is like an risk exercise, right? You come up with a very high number, you'll get to know that, okay, this is not available, that is not available, this type of instance is not available, this capacity is not available, or this will build out in this time, or it is might be available in another region. So you have to plan how do you shift your traffic from one region to another region and do all of those exercises, right? So that base number is super important for you to start those conversations. So that's why the backup envelope calculation is where your capacity planning starts in a way.
Yeah, I would assume it's very interesting because I think what you're saying is at two counts, right? One is a fault isolation and being able to understand literally everything that can go wrong,
Yeah.
and including external systems and internal systems.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and then almost being able to sort of have a mitigation plan already factored in to say,
Yes.
and then running those simulations.
Yes.
Wow, sounds
In fact, the funny thing is, when you think about infra, it is just not your infra. Okay, at IPL scale, it is all your partners' infra also,
right.
because you and your partner might be sitting inside the same data center, requesting the same volume of servers, and
Yeah.
and suddenly you realize, oh, oh, whoa, whoa, we do not have capacity, because everyone thought when they were planning that, okay, this is available. So when we have to work, we have to also account and factor in and say that, okay, just do not, like, I when we talk to providers, infrastructure providers, we go specifically and tell them that, hey, do not just budget for our infra, also budget for our partners infra who are also running in a similar environment. Figure it out if there is any other noisy neighbor, right? Like literally noisy neighbor problems can occur at the scale at which we operate, because
Yeah.
each of the neighbors can be of significant size.
Wow. It must be quite an exercise to be able to do that. I see, though, there's probably a story that the way you're describing it, where you've run out of capacity, possibly. Is there anything to it that you could share?
Oh, we have run out of capacity multiple times. We have run out of capacity. I don't want to name some in
Sure.
particular this thing, but we have run out of capacity multiple times. But there's solutions to it. It's not like it becomes a this thing. We ideally we would, as a company, or as a product being out of India, you would want to operate as much possible closer to the users. You don't want to go to different regions and
Right.
support them, right? So
Right.
so your priority is always to operate that. But over the course of time, we have also learned that you have to be flexible if you want to sustain a scale like this, right? The problem with IPL, or an event like IPL or this thing, is that it's a very seasonal event. Okay. So the incentive for providers to beef up, like, okay, I need capacity, they will build it up for 2 months, 3 months, right? But why, what would they do of it for the remaining 9 months? There's not so much of things happening in the digital world that it'll go off use, right? And there's a lot of one of the things which I want to do was calculate the environment impact of running this, right? Like if you think about that, I think AWS started doing this or something like that. They give an
Right.
environment impact of running a machine or something like that. But anyway, coming back, the point is that our demands are very seasonal in nature. To build it out, it's very hard. So we have to always think about what is available around. We have to work around with that. So there are stories where just 2 days or 3 days before an event, you'll realize, okay, this is not available, this is not happening. What do we do? The capacity is not available in a particular data center. What do we do? We are forced to sometimes run out of an, like, will at that time, what we do is actually we move our secondary workloads. We look at, so say everything in our system is prioritized. Okay, I always say that anything which comes in the path of watching a video is P0. Anything which comes to control how the playback or the video works is P0. Then anything which makes me money is P1. Then after that, anything is P2. Okay, so P2 systems is which takes hit when these kind of constraints happen, that you have to augment them either out of the primary locations and move them to secondary locations and ensure that your P0 and P1 can continue to operate.
Yeah. I think, and also that would mean being able to work with all these internal teams where they know what tier of their services is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
In some way.
that is super important. That is super important to communicate, because the last thing you want to be in a fight with a team leader or someone saying that, hey, why are you shutting down my system at scale?
Yeah.
My system can operate. Sure, your system can operate, but if I were to consider what I'm here for, right? I'm here to serve the users, right? And I'm here to make money out of the process, right? And then enhance the experience, right? We want to enhance the experience. I'm not saying that we should not enhance the experience, but at at a certain point, right? Like if I'm operating at 32 million and I've got 32 million users on the platform, there's only 1% people watching VOD. Everyone else is watching live, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need to build I don't need to keep the entire platform enabled for the VOD consumption, because that's a very different consumption pattern as well.
Yeah. I guess an interesting thing would be then actually during the war room, right? I'm assuming for the 3 to 4 hours of an IPL or a cricket match, if it's especially T20, uh, what would an incident management look like? How do you even prioritize alarms going off and figuring out their priority and what impact they have and being able to resolve? Could you shed some light on how does that actually?
So you it's a very good question. Okay, I'm just trying to think that how do I explain it, because a lot of it happens in the moment of time,
Right.
and whenever you'll retrospect, you'll realize, okay, you could have done this better. Okay,
Sure.
so the idea with the incident management is that, one, you always have a visibility of what is important. Okay, so prioritization is a super important key to anything, right? You might not be dealing with because you're always dealing with incidents, right? When a match is running, at least the critical parts come into the first week when you're entering an event, when you've got a new system which is going into a event. Like first 2 weeks are very critical, right? At that point there are a lot of issues which are coming in. So super important for us is to try and say that whether this is of important or not. Okay, and if it is not of importance, do we apply mitigation and keep it silent? Like just apply a mitigation. The simple mitigation can be turn off certain features, degrade it, disable certain capabilities, and just reduce noise, right? So that is one strategy, right? You prioritize first and then you reduce noise by saying, okay, this is not important, I'll look at it once the event is over. Okay, so that you always try to keep your board clean. Like we always try to ensure that your P1s and P2s, or like P0s, sevens and sev2s, or whatever we call sevens and sev2s, are always on the top of the list, and that is always having an attention, right? Even within that, there is stack ranking. Okay, so that we always ensure that there is always attention to it, right? And senior leaders in our company always keep on coming in and picking up what whenever they get done with one of the incidents they are dealing with, they will come and pick another one and start focusing on it. And when they're picking up, they will look at it if there is any issue which is of more importance than the one they are operating on, and it has not been picked, right? And we have policies internally to escalate and get more attentions when a more severe issue comes in, to get more people involved, right? It's like if there is a sev 1, then it's all hands on the deck, right? Everyone should be focused on mitigating that first, then trying to mitigate 10 other sev 2s. And that definition of what is sev 1 and what is sev 2 is very important, right? So when you're doing
Yeah.
incident management, a lot of time you'll have things like, oh, this is super important, we should look at it, this is critical. But the ability to say that, okay, this is not important compared to this, is super important, right? Like you should be very clear on saying that, okay, I'll give you an example of that, right? Once you had an issue where you're having trouble with sending SMS, right? uh, People having being able to log in onto the platform, and then there was playback, right? And we were having issues with playback. What would you pick when these two incidents come in front of you, right? I will say, okay, let me just reduce the rates of login, or let me just unblock video for some time and let people continue watching the video, and focus on ensuring that the playback system works, because that is more critical and more important for users than actually ensuring that people are logging in at that point, right? We have mechanisms built in to, once you have restored the system, like the playback system, I can go back and ask users to log in at a delayed this thing, right? So we do those kind of things to ensure that there is the platform keeps on up and running.
Yeah, very interesting because I would assume Being able to coordinate that across such a large team and not just a footprint of infrastructure, uh, I'm sure there's things that you've figured over years that just work better.
Oh, yeah, we have these very strict war room protocols with saying that every team has its own leaders and spokes defined. There's one person who's dedicated. See, communication is super important. So there's one person who's always dedicated and communicating what they're operating on how they're looking into an issue into a central war room. So you run a central war room where you've got all the leads and all the senior leaders and everyone is present over there looking at how the event is progressing. There is a game marshal. The role of the game marshal is to ensure that the event is working fine. Okay, while you have standard on calls looking at each of the areas, the game marshal is just focused on not the platform, just that live event is working fine. Okay, we have another on call for the platform, right? For the rest of the issues which are happening and taking care of it. And he needs to be updated. He's the one who's making the all the calls, critical calls, and every important call. And he's ensuring that there is always attention to the issues which are important from the perspective of live events. So yes, there is a lot of we do a lot of training and program management around this with people and ensuring that teams work right. And this is how we like at least I have seen IPL being successful the last 7 years.
How has your experience running IPL and World Cups over the last 7 years actually changed? What has changed over these many years?
Things have got smoother and smoother, in my opinion. Uh, Once you do it, a certain thing after a number of times, you feel that it's become smoother. Yes, there are issues, there are own challenges every year, but I feel like we have better understanding over the course of years. I have built a good knowledge about how things operate, how things are interrelated, and all of that, right? So you build that muscle memory, right? So that is one thing which has happened. Technology has matured a lot. A lot of things have changed in the technology systems. Like we have uh, uh, we have seen systems mature, things mature. I recall first season of IPL, we used to struggle with encoders, video encoding is an issue. That there are CPUs, there's black frames, there is video quality is an issue. Those systems have matured. Things have come in. A lot of technology has come in that dimensions. Scaling used to be a challenge. Handling so much connections because I I, I don't recall in 2018 or before 2018 there was someone who was doing live streaming at that scale, right? Not even at a global scale. So
Yeah.
people who build out cloud load balancers and all of that never thought of dealing with these kind of scales, right? So consumers are there, they will deal with this thing, and you're offering a SaaS like a PaaS solutions or sorry, infrastructure as a service solutions, which means you have to abstract away the complexity behind it from the customers, and then you encounter. We've met, I think over the course of years, systems have matured a lot. Cloud providers have matured a lot. We have matured a lot as a group, as a set of people who are operating on it, and that has changed. So maturity has brought in stability, and that has brought in resiliency to the event.
Interesting. Anything from a technical perspective that has evolved, fundamental changes that have made things smoother, better?
So I, I I think digital infrastructure presence in the India has changed drastically. Monitoring systems have evolved. I recall that on first 2 seasons or 3 seasons of IPL, we our Grafana and Prometheus used to crash, right? This is a funny incident. Okay, I think we are using Prometheus at that point. Yeah, we are using Prometheus. We generally before the event we scale up our entire infrastructure like 3 hours or 4 hours before the event starts. Now, typically, when you're logging a metric, you will log the metric quantum. You will log your the dimensions of it. The dimensions will typically include the node IP, the pod IP, and some of the interesting stuff. Now, day one of IPL, we started scaling up. We got we just added another. Let's say we added about 5,000 or 6,000 instances, and every metric had a pod IP as a dimension. Okay, and that just exploded Prometheus. Okay, your metric and monitoring system is completely blind. You do not have any visibility on how you're operating
Wow.
because nobody thought that Prometheus would like. Everyone assumed that Prometheus like system would scale, but those things happened, right? And then we have seen since then systems have matured. We have been working with. We have been using last nine. We have been using different other systems, and we have seen maturity in terms of how we use our metric stores. Like I don't have to worry about my second order problems. Like I don't have to worry about that. My logging systems are not working. My metric systems are not working. That is the last of the problems I want to have on my uh, on my hand when I'm operating an event like that.
Yeah, fascinating. I remember one of those instances talking to you about where Grafana dashboards were being shared over a Zoom calls.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was quite a uh,
We
quite
had
an
to do that.
interesting.
I recall. We had to do that because the number of everyone was opening the dashboard and it was triggering a query to the Prometheus, and it was like heavy queries. So we have to like
Yeah,
literally say to teams that, hey, please share your Grafana dashboards over the Zoom call instead of everyone opening your own dashboards. Uh, yeah, those were interesting problems.
absolutely. How do you think this whole so what I hear from you, and maybe I'm trying to summarize in some ways, right? Like reliability is also almost I like the framing where you say it's almost like risk planning in some ways, where everything can
Yeah,
go. And how do you mitigate that and have existing recipes to almost recover from it
yeah.
that you can respond to in real time? Would you say in this case, a recovery from incidents is super critical than just being able to dive deep? Like if people are trying to build systems, how do you think about the debuggability versus the real-time monitoring nature of
So I
the
would, I think I would break that. Recoverability is also a wrong term in my opinion. Okay, mitigation is a different thing. Okay, recoverability means that you're bringing the system to the original state. Okay, mitigations means that you're just mitigating the issue. The mitigation, if there's a like if there's a running tap water and water is leaking, the mitigation to it is to just put a cloth or something to block the water flow from happening. And recoverability in that sense is to replace the tap and ensure that the tap is working fine. That is recoverability. Okay, so I would say recoverability comes later. Mitigation is super important to stop bleeding and to stop the leakage from happening. And debugging on all of can be happen later on, right? Like I that is not the time, right? Again, IPL is a time sensitive event. Sure, if you don't have any other issues, you would go and debug and try to restore the systems. But the first port of call is to mitigate, get it out of the way, so that there is no cascading effects. You do not want one system crashing to have another system crashing, and that leading to cascading effects. So first port of call is mitigate. We have planned enough for mitigation. We have multiple tiers of mitigation, multiple layers of mitigation. If that is one mitigation doesn't work, like for example, if your tap is leaking, then if you cannot shut it off on a floor level, go and shut it off on the mainline level, right? Like just ensure that your tap leakage stops first, and then you go and try to recover and restore everything back, right? But you continue operating, right? You want to stop bleeding so that you do not run out of water, you do not run out of the thing, and your system dies. That's the last thing you want to. You want to maintain supply,
absolutely. I think
and
being
and,
able
and
to
that is based on the Bangalore water shortage. It just clicked in my mind because Bangalore is facing interesting water shortage problems.
yeah, similarly, I say to you and the extended team is that you all love traffic, but on the internet and not in Bangalore. So, all right, I think we have 5 more minutes before we open it up for some Q&A from people. So, any interesting stories you would love to share with us in terms of war rooms or other aspects of these that have really made a mark? And follow up from there was also any advice for people who want to get into this, think about reliability and sort of think about how they should think about their own software in the context of this.
See, war room stories. There's a lot of war room stories which cannot be disclosed for variety of reasons. Uh,
All
but
right.
I'm just trying to think what I can share. And I think I told you about the metric and monitoring system failures.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
recall.
I think let
Oh
me
yeah,
ask you.
I can.
Sorry, go on.
Let me share one story. Okay, you have heard about thundering effect problems, right? You have heard about thundering effect. Uh, so once on one of our systems or like couple of our systems, we were seeing a lot of thundering effect coming on, right? Like suddenly a wave of traffic. Like we have been seeing, let's say about 2 million RPS. We saw about 3 million RPS, and that was kind of increasing. And we were really worried that okay, someone is doing a DDoS on our system, and we started going into that direction. Oh, someone is doing a DDoS, someone is doing a DDoS. Let's inspect on the security aspect and all of that, and only to realize that there is something we messed up in our clients, uh, which is triggering a scenario, and our clients are DDoSing our backup systems, right? And that is the last thing you want, right? You do not want to. give your users a device which can bring down your system, like distribute it legally to them, and ensure like they are hitting your systems and bringing it down. That those kind of incidents have happened. We have seen those things as
How
well.
much
Yeah.
that brings me actually to an interesting question where how much given that this uh, devices slash are mostly mobile applications, they're already shipped with the code. An update is probably not possible as an immediate solution. What does then it look like?
Mitigations, you have to plan for every failure. You have to plan for your devices misbehaving, your systems misbehaving, and everything, right? Again, when we look at it, that's why we do code freezes. We lock our applications long before, we let them see certain tournaments beforehand, so we observe patterns and understand if there is anything misbehavior. That has also been a learning, right? Like after, like we used to be ninjas releasing apps one day before the IPL and so on, and like
Yeah.
okay, then we then realized okay, you have these kind of issues, so we started locking our apps and ensuring that the changes are not going into the app, like they're going at least a month before and see at least couple of events and things like that.
Yeah, I would imagine. Also, then, would this mean that given how you described the on-call and the nature of these issues, there's no central reliability slash SRE team? Like, how do you think about the organization of this on-call slash actual reliability team? Is it because there's always these two models, right? There's a central team versus people actually as API developers taking up that responsibility.
See, they're not running data centers, to be honest, right? That you need a centralized reliability team at this point, and I don't think uh, probably very large companies at Google scale may be operating with a central SRE team because they can uh, their scale of operations and the way they develop software is very different, right? But for companies where I've operated and where we operate, I don't think we can afford to have a central SRE team, right? So you need to amp up your existing people with the right tools, right? You have to groom them to be the SREs for their product. I think SREs come into the picture when your organization crosses a certain threshold. I would be very surprised to see a company with SRE, uh, like with an SRE team at a stage of 100 people or 200 people or 500 people, right? SREs would come at probably 1,000 people scale. And even so, right, making SREs understand that how your system works and hiring people of that caliber is gonna be always be a challenge, right? So it is important to develop that skill. Like what does an SRE do? SRE is a person who understands the system end to end and who understands how system operates and what are the impacts of different components of system on each other. That's what an SRE is, right? And you can develop that skill, and that's a very good growth for anyone in your engineering team, right? It will build your super strong this thing. So I would always go on a camp of saying that your teams should be owning that because they know when they build the system, they're fully aware of how things operate and how everything works, and so it is best for them to operate this.
Yeah.
And then firing, I feel like hiring SREs is pain. Like I don't know, but finding SREs is pain. So I'll much rather go and get a tool at least till I find good SRE team to be established to support my SRE function, right? And equip that every team member with that tool so that they can operate and do a mini version of SRE, if not full SRE, but they can do a version of SRE.
At least have some co-pilot that can
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah,
support
yeah,
that journey. All right. I think we ran through this 40 minutes. I didn't realize. So I'm going
yeah.
to open up it up. There's always so much to discuss, and I think we covered only a fair bit, not even went into the trenches.
I'm
Uh,
surprised I did not had an internet snag at the airport. I was super skeptical. Like generally, this area of the airport has like a lot of snag in general, right? Like I've rarely come across a stable internet connection. Yeah,
we were also preparing for it and had a failure scenario planned. I'll talk about later.
yeah.
Uh, but all right, with that, I'll Prathamesh, do you want to sort of talk about questions? I think I'm having a hard time opening them up. I think we might have picked a few, answered a few, so maybe start with the others.
I'll go through the question. So Ganesh Padmanabhan, he has a question about a cricket match is a streaming process. So how does that integrate with the mobile app? Is like how does that work? Like does it involve satellite? Does it involve something else? Like how does the whole process works?
It involves everything. I will say very simply, right? Like if I were to in India when IPL runs, I'll explain. one camera feed, which when one single camera, so a stadium has multiple cameras, right? One camera is streaming or generating video at a bit rate of about 14 to 15 mbps at least, or it can go even higher with 4K cameras that it can go up to like 40 mbps. I don't think satellite technology has matured enough that you can have 40 mbps of lines coming from 100 cameras and you're streaming 4 gbps of data via satellite. So yes, you can do that, but you do that for backup and distribution and other things. The final, I'm talking about the raw footage, right? The raw footage has to come to a studio where someone would mix it and direct it, right? What you see is not the stadium feed. You see a but there are cricket directors, like how you have movie directors and how you have this thing, who are actually telling you, okay, take this shot or take this view or take that view and so on, right? So the raw footage has to come over there. It has to be mixed, and then it has to be downstream and all of that. So you have fiber cables running from stadiums to your studios and all of those things. So a lot of this is mix of that, and then that is all happening on an analog, sort of an analog digital blend. Like some of this has moved to digital, some of this is still operating on analog versions, and then you do digital conversion and distribute it via internet, right? Standard internet. So and you always have satellite backups and all of that. It's not, I'm not saying that everything is operating on fiber, right? Sometimes a fiber cut can happen. You can have a national highway being constructed and that cutting down your fiber links and so on, right? There are multiple things which can happen. We have seen those as well, so I'll tell you, I can tell you that. So there's a lot of things involved to ensure, like I said, like it's like clockwork, right? A lot of things have to come together to make it work. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Ganesh, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free. Sachin Sharma has a question. So, what are some metrics that you would notice before pushing things to production? So, let's say before a deployment or or before the match, perhaps. Like, what would be the metrics
So
that you would keep an eye on?
see, before pushing to production, I would look at all my P0 metrics. My P0 metrics typically for a web service or an API service would be request volume, HTTP codes, your response times, your response times and average P50 and so on. Very basic. And see, it's running systems at scale is all about your basics. If generally I recommend that your systems have a constant P50, right? I can understand averages variance, but your P50 would be constant. If the P50 is constant and if that is fluctuating right after deployment, then you know that something has degraded or something has changed, right? It's a very sensitive metric if you were to look at it. I would even like if a service used to operate at a 5 ms or a 6 ms, right, and it goes to 7 ms, that is also variance for me. That is degradation for me. Right? Something has changed in the characteristic of the service. So I'm very sensitive about these basic fundamental metrics. CPU utilization and all of that is also something which you can look at it. But these are the things which I'm looking at from an API standpoint. And
Great.
before the deployment, I'll
Ganesh
look at
has another.
product
Yeah,
metrics also.
sorry.
Some product metrics as well, like obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much, Ashu, in this over raw metrics, do you sort of think about them as SLIs as well, if necessary?
How much can you elaborate?
I
Like
mean,
what do you mean?
essentially, there's a lot of sort of for a service or an infra, typically a lot of metrics that are coming through, right? I think earlier you
Hmm.
mentioned leading indicators and sort of lagging
Yeah, yeah,
indicators.
yeah.
In there, sort of in terms of actual implementation, do you refer to them as SLIs that are key for a service?
Yep,
Or
yep. We refer to them as an SLIs, like these are
right,
service level indicators. So
right,
basically, we define out of 100 metrics, as I told you, right? You'll always have trading leading indicators, and you will define them as SLIs because again,
right.
any change in those SLIs or SLOs, like SLOs of those SLIs, is representative of a problem. So I would define a certain subset of metrics which are essential to your this thing, and just observe and obsess over that. Okay, everything else is for debugging and tracing and other purpose, in my opinion. Okay, but there's only few systems metrics which can act as an SLIs and on which your SLO should be set. You should not try to say that, okay, I've got 100 metrics, I've got this DB query time, I've got this function execution time, I'm gonna set SLIs and SLOs on top of it. Then you'll go crazy.
Yeah.
Srijit has a question. Is there any unique learning from any of the incidents managing an infra of this scale?
There's always unique learning. Every day is a unique learning of managing incident of this thing. I believe very rarely people get opportunity to operate in fact the scale at such a with such a small team. I've been fortunate to operate, and that drives a lot of learning and this thing. I've shared a couple of examples before. So yeah.
Right. Neil has a question. It is about structuring the teams. So, how do you structure engineering teams?
That is might be a little off topic from here,
Yeah.
but typically the team structures are not function of how I operate IPL. Team structures are generally function of how my product works or how my product is. Different organizations have different team structures. I don't think I change my structure of the team just because I have to run an IPL. That will be wrong thing to do. It will create a lot of issues in terms of then ownership and things. You want people to have constant ownership throughout the thing. Org structuring has nothing to do with how you run IPL.
Ganesh has a question. How did you come up with a game day test strategies to address the scaling for massive concurrent users?
GMD test strategy was very interesting problem. We said we want to do load testing, okay. And when we were doing load testing, we said, okay, well, load testing is typically you'll do vertical testing and say, okay, I want to go from 0 to 10,000 RPS in certain span of time and all of that, right? You will like probably do different variants of it, but it'll still not represent the real, right? Like I'll give an example. We're doing testing of a payment system, and everyone said that I can do 2K RPS or 3K RPS on my payment gateway. Okay. Now, what they missed out in that mix was that when your payment system is like your transaction API can do 2K RPS or 3K RPS, but when your payment system is running, people are also looking at their ledger, people are also fetching their recent transactions, people are also looking at different other things also. So there's mix of traffic which is coming in, right? It is not just a single API which is getting load. So load testing independently doesn't work, right? So game day testing is more designed to simulate how my actual product is being used. It's based on how my product behaves, how my product works, and it is just a representation of my clients. That's what the game day testing is all about, right? That it represents my client. It is the way to simulate how my mobile apps work, how my different platform work, and then just multiply it to the factor of the number of people you anticipate, and see how your systems behave. And what that does is it generates random patterns. Okay. Every time I run that script, it will generate a random pattern, unpredictable pattern, and it might be unrealistic also, but it generates a random pattern, right? What that leads to is it leads to discovery of new issues. Sometimes one API would get concentrated at certain point of time and that will crash, or sometimes a certain set of systems will get a sustained traffic for long duration, they will crash. Like it generates random patterns out of it.
Yep. In the interest of time, I think we'll take the other questions on Discord. I'll share the link
We
for
could
that
just take
later.
maybe one more.
Yeah,
Prathamesh.
definitely. Yeah.
I think there's an interesting one. Like, what's your current stack like? And if you had to start from scratch, would you do anything different?
I think my current stack of technology is a blend of different like uh, like at GeoCinema we use Node.js, we use Golang heavily. Golang is used primarily for all user facing systems. Most of the systems go on that. Node.js is used for our some of the backend systems, some of the auxiliary systems to power where there's a lot of metadata dealing and all of that. Like you use Golang where you need to very specific ask and responses. Underlying databases, we have variety of databases. We use Redis. Redis is primarily like actually that is the one which is sitting in the line of hot path and protecting your heavy stores like Cassandra, Scylla, and some of those things, right? So my tech stack is function of that. If I have to build things, I would always build things better, right? That's a continuous process. I don't think anyone would go and build the system in the way they have built it before. Like if I were to ask you, Nishan, that how would you build your last line or any of your products, you'll say, I'll do it different. So same answer applies over it. I believe so. I'm not sure if
Right.
you think otherwise, but I believe like based on your experience, you'll always build it differently. I'll not go and repeat it, obviously. So yeah,
All right. Amazing. Thanks a lot, Ashu, for
no worries.
joining
Thank you,
this.
Nishan,
Really appreciate.
for
Would be
inviting
great
me.
to.
No, no, I'm saying thank you for inviting me. This has been super. We have been working for last couple of years. We have done a lot of good stuff. I believe. I would be thankful for your contributions and everything as well. I think IPL as a product has matured a lot of systems and a lot of things which we work with, a lot of products we work with, and we have seen things come along and like now I've seen the part which I enjoy, right? I've seen so much of successful products coming out of because of our journey and how we work and collaborate with that it's good to see them doing different stuff, right? Exploring and changing the way how people use technology. I'm sorry, I was interrupted on that. Yeah.
No, absolutely right. I think your contribution to not just the running of IPL, but the technology ecosystem around it, of what it makes to support it, has given rise to lots of other opportunities for entrepreneurs like me to continue pushing the boundary of what is possible. And that's always
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks again, Ashu. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you, everyone.
Hope to talk again soon.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.